and the government? Or should I say, is the Cameroon government having more and more challenges to deal with its citizens? This question and more are those of traditional rulers from the West region that came out in a powerful 6-page communique to decry all the human rights violation that is currently happening nationwide. The question as far as a military solution to the Anglophone problem is concerned, but equally through regards on issues concerning government response to COVID-19. Today, we are going to be zooming on traditional rulers outing from the West region and comparing them with those of other 9 regions, because in their communique, they call on traditional rulers, keepers of our tradition nationwide, to do everything as a matter of urgency to let their opinion come as far as the various crises in Cameroon is concerned. At the same time, while we are marching ahead the December the 6th regional election, traditional rulers from Fako and Southwest are already on the field lobbying for their peers to, vote them come December 6th. Away from that, we shall equally talk about government projections as far as 2021 is concerned, according to Prime Minister, Chief of Government, I'm forgetting the name a bit. Chief Doctor, we'll be back on the name, it's skipping my mind. According to the Prime Minister of Cameroon, he thinks Cameroon is going to bounce back on its feet after falling short of the gross domestic product in 2020 because of the ravages of COVID-19 to from 1.7 to some 2.4, and we are asking ourselves, are all the economic activity possible for us to actually grow to that extent? Are the activity buoyant? Are we able, through the challenges that we are facing, the security challenge, the social challenge, the health challenge, to actually work towards those figures? The Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Diongute, finally, I have the name, cited in his communique. Back here in Fako, the SEO of Fako, Ledoux, decided to come out with a communique ahead the end of year festivity to ban bags at the entrance of markets and every public place. According to sources from the streets, they are asking themselves, how practical would this be, knowing that the previous communique from the Minat boss, Mr. Paul Atanganji, that of banning machetes and other wide weapons was ineffective, or should we say, it wasn't followed up properly. These and many more are the stakes that will constitute today's edition of Cross Views of Monday, November 30th, 2020. With me already seated in the studio is a crack team of young gentlemen, very sound in their domain, that want to dissect issues here. The first of them is Mr. Gabriel. He is a political analyst and a lecturer from the Catholic University Institute of Boya. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Cyril.
How is the Monday? It's a good start in Boya, and we are happy to have you. How did you find your way in our studio? Was it difficult?
Obviously, it was very difficult because the towns have been deserted. The towns, on Mondays, you hardly see people moving, so we just struggled to reach here. It was a lot of risks there that we took.
Thanks for being with us. Besides you, Mr. Should I say Dr. Carl Monica, am I allowed to call you doctor?
No, still a Mr.
Okay, Mr. So good evening and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor being on set with you, and these are pertinent issues that we have to discuss, knowing that a new year is beginning, and the people need to be vested with what's going on in the country, and I'm very, very privileged to be on set here with you.
To start with, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the guidance post this evening. That title, Government Mutes as Lawyers Begin Nationwide Strikes. Government has remained silent following repeated attack on the lawyers. The Bar Council some 1 week ago came out and pronounced in a communique signed by the interim bar president that lawyers were going to take on to a 4 days straight strike because of all the utterances they have been victim, both on the streets, in the judiciary police, but most importantly in the temple of justice, that is the court. I want to start with you, Mr. Gabriel, to ask you, what did you make of this strike? Has it been effective? Have you checked to see whether lawyers were not in court today nationwide?
Yes, it is very possible. It is very noticeable, the absence of lawyers in court these recent days. These lawyers have expressed their indignations for a second time. I think the first time they expressed their indignation was at the genesis of the Anglophone Crisis.
Yes.
What I would advise the government, obviously, is these are people we hold high esteem. By being a lawyer, we're talking about those who advocate for the rights of all the citizens of a country. So once they are talking about a protest, it should be taken with a lot of consideration. It is very difficult, or it will be somehow insane, to give an appraisal to the silence of the government on the declaration of lawyers to go on for a 4-day strike. Because in their indignation, they express maybe some are being bullied in courts, others, like what happened in Douala recently. Honestly, it is true that there might be differences between these two people. There might be differences. Maybe their indignations might not be very coherent or stable. But then again, how does the government handle this situation? Let us not for a second time accept a situation which might be very difficult to control when we could handle it presently. These lawyers presently, if you go to court, and maybe for those of us who have gone to their offices for 1 or 2 cases, they are actually taking into consideration with firm what they have put in practice as 4-day strike. Their strike is to express their indignation, and the call for the government is for them to actually listen to what these lawyers have as indignations and play the father's role at the appropriate time, and do not wait for when it will be difficult to control.
Just after you, Mr. Carl Monica, do you see the government being challenged with this lawyer strike?
Wow. Dr. Of course the government is being challenged, because if you're in a system where military rule becomes the order of the day, even to people that we highly esteem, like lawyers, even the lecturers, we even had incidents where PhD holders got beaten in Yaoundé. If you see when that becomes a rule, that means that it's a challenge to a system, and indeed the government needs to find better solutions to bring up and to tackle the imminent.
Carl, if it was that challenging, the government could have at least produced a communique like it was done in the times of Bâtonnier Parti, Chakunte, who is of blessed memory. But this time around, the government is not deeming necessary. Are they minimizing the action of the current interim bar president?
Now we have to realize that it's a government that it's not small. Okay. There's this let me say pride issue in quote. Okay. The government knows that's the problem. They're facing the challenge. But the rule of repression, oppression is let me say what they take to solve the problem, and it's failing. They have to come to the realization that it's failing and bring up better solutions to tackle this problem.
After you, Mr. Carl, Mr. Gabriel, I want to ask you, the government did everything so that pre-electoral litigation should take place before the 30th. It actually took place within the weekend and on Friday. Is it that the government was afraid that if we enter this period of the 30th to the 4th of December, the court might likely have no lawyer to stand by the complainants, those who are filing pre-electoral litigations?
Well, it is a theorem whose proof is still to be achieved. It could be a possibility, but what we can say for now, as per the setting of the dates prior to the lawyers' protest is that the government masters better the activities of every citizen. And if they've taken into consideration the protest of the lawyers before setting the 3 days of litigation, then it means that to some extent they've acknowledged the reality of their indignations, and that will be one step ahead. But if it is not the case, then it means that we are going past the journey line, which will be much more difficult for us to handle. It means that they have resorted much to their superiority complex and forgotten the government of the people, for the people, by the people.
Does that hold still obtain in Cameroon when we have personally seen attack on lawyers, where lawyers are arrested and shipped directly into prison without any form of warrant of arrest or any respect of the procedure, the criminal procedure court?
Well, I'm afraid to say that that rule still holds in our nation, because the numerous case studies that we have in front of us proves the opposite. We have had many cases where lawyers have been molested, lawyers, have been denigrated. It is an assassination to the core. We have had many cases where, like he rightly said, the PhD holders. I think that there are some people who, by virtue of their academic standards or by virtue of their social rank in the society, for the core in itself, there should be a different way in which the government should handle them. So I can't say that the government is handling it the way, that the rule of for the people and by the people is still working.
After you, Mr. Gabriel, Mr. Carl, this very core, have they not given the government the cane to whip them? Come to think of lawyers that take bribe until the client had to denounce that he gave 3 million to a lawyer to give to the magistrate so that the penalty should not be exaggerated. Coming back in Boya also, we have cases of lawyers that maybe expose themselves to corrupt practices. This alone, could it not force the government hand or the magistrate to give them the penalty, the sanction, the humiliation, as the ones that we saw here in Boya in 2016 and this year 2020 in Douala, the Bonanjo Court?
Wow, exactly. You see, that's the problem, because many people lose integrity, and you realize when you begin to sell such core value like integrity, you, of course, you're going to bear the consequences, and one of the consequences is, over dominance. One of the consequences is this abuse. And these people that are supposed to stand up for the rule of law, like the barristers and magistrates, immediately they get into practices that are not very excellent. We are not surprised to see a society that we have now, because Mr. Cyril, it's no secret that present in our country, we are in the crossroad where we can't even define if we're in a democracy or not. And it's because people that were supposed to exhibit virtues of true leadership are losing it just to get a sense of money or a sense of survival instead of living. So I call for on the lawyers and major stakeholders in the country to hold on to values like integrity. I'm a major leader, and you can't be a leader without integrity. You're going to have such consequences that we have in the country.
Does that what integrity sits down in this 38 years ruling system, where more and more we see academic dishonesty amongst university dons, where we see corruption practices amongst the judiciary, where we hardly distinguish between the 3 arms of government, the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative? Can we still uphold that word integrity?
Yeah, integrity, now, I'll say it's person dependent. I won't just, say on the government and overly criticize that nobody in the government is having a sense of integrity. But it's true that we have persons in offices that it no longer exists. Okay. Yeah, in some offices. But on a general basis, I still believe in the country. I still believe in persons that uphold morals. And if they're just given opportunities to be at major positions, to be at the limelight, they're going to express it more. And that's why we need to keep fighting. Young people need to come out. Young people need to start taking the mantle We are the ones to create the change. If we,
It is a very young people in the lawyers profession that are being attacked. We haven't seen this attack on a mature lawyer. We mostly see it with young people. Is it that young people want to bite more than they can swallow?
no, it's not about that. It's actually the fact that young people are determined to come out of this stage which we've presently find ourselves in, and there are also some of the young people that are part of the system. So you realize that it's not an age factor per se. Being young, I think it's a mindset, because we also see very young people that align themselves with the government so much in malpractices. You have several cases of students that have been bribed to protest against francs and so on, which they came out. So you see that I think it's a call for young people to come out, or for young people to be determined, and for young people to hold true to what they believe.
Come on the streets?
Yeah, it's part of the process. We can't refuse a protest for a transition or for a change. There's no country that hasn't experienced
That will be tough for another day. Mr. Gabriel, I want to find out from you, after these 4 days, what next? If the government does not yield to the pressure from the lawyers, what are other alternatives the lawyers have? Are they going to declare a 3-month strike?
Well, I think that the lawyers have a plan B.
Okay.
I think that they have a plan B because this is not the first time, like I said before, that they've gone on protest in this nation, and they know much about the repressive attitude of the government.
Could the plan B be the dislocation of the judicial honor that was supposed to be given to late Bâtonnier Pati Chakunte, because they said they were to remove it from the Supreme Court to do it elsewhere? Would the government be ashamed that a former Bâtonnier has not been given a judicial honor?
I think that the level at which the government has snubbed most of the very important activities that, uphold the integrity of this nation, it can be an opportunity. It can be a possibility that they don't find it much more denigrating that a former president of the Bar Council of blessed memory is not being laid to rest in its honor, in his proper honor that is supposed to be. But if it is a point of view that could be heard or accepted by the government, I think that for the sake of the integrity of the office, because sometimes we only look at the personality, but we don't look at the chair on which the person is sitting. For the sake of the integrity of the office of the Bar Council, they should try to listen to the indignations of the lawyers and try to give an opportunity for a dialogue, for a true dialogue between them, and to enable future peace for this nation.
Still on the guardian post, ladies and gentlemen, Minat Boss on security tour in the northern region. Paul Atanganji was in Marwa last week, where he was preaching the gospel of peace to the people of Marwa. And to you, Mr. Carl Monica, I want to find out, can you preach peace to a hungry stomach?
That's not possible. That the message of peace embodies everything, embodies economic independence, embodies good health care, embodies a good political system. So you can't preach peace when you have not ensured that all these various facets are being fully occupied. So the government needs to realize that people are not getting what they're saying, they're actually getting who they are. So if a family can't eat a square meal a day, that's insecurity. And I think that we need to start solving these pertinent issues in society before proclaiming a message of peace.
Where are the technical advisors to the minister to give him some of this prerequisite to peace? Why should he go on peace sermon all the time knowing that people are hungry?
I think that they are not ignorant of what they are doing.
Okay.
To buttress his point, he spoke about an empty stomach. You cannot preach peace to an empty stomach, or preach peace to somebody who does not have a house or where to lay his head. I think that if you want to give a solution to something, you go right to the roots. If you cut the tree at the middle, then it has a possibility of sprouting up and growing one day again. And when we're talking about the roots, we're talking about the fundamental problems, the remote cause that instigated or that orchestrated what is happening in the nation, what they are about to solve. If the
Mr.
government is going-
Koratangandi say he was sent on high instruction from the head of state. Are we afraid of the recent attack of Boko Haram in neighboring Nigeria, that it could happen equally in Cameroon at this end of year festive period?
That's very possible. The Boko Haram attack on Cameroon will just exacerbate again the situation, because we're having a lot of crises now. We have the Anglophone crisis, we have the general crisis of the political opposition parties, and we have what is happening in the east region of Cameroon. And if Boko Haram comes again to add, notice that these things have financial consequences on the nation. So sending them for a message of peace, it's a way of solutioning it, but it is another way of permitting the city to grow again. Like I reiterate, the people who are concerned here have seen those faces times and again. Many times have they visited them and preached the message of peace. I rather instead think, in fact, for me, the message of peace has some relation with the regional elections, if I may say so. Because notice that the message of peace of the government usually comes prior to elections, be it municipal or legislative elections and so forth. So we cannot really have the agenda. I can see.
Are you saying it's an attempt to corruption?
Well, if you say so, but what I'm saying is it has a high possibility to, it has some intersection with
some dinosaurs.
Yes, there's something between that and the regional elections which are coming. And if you think, look at the statistics of how it has been happening before. Before every election, you see in the French-speaking section, there's this lingua of Peng Sardine. There is this lingua of Le Sardina. There is this lingua of Le Tontina. We have gone to a stage where segregation has imposed himself in the nation and exacerbated the negative consequences of tribalism. So if you are coming in for a peace message, we had a peace message in Southwest by the Prime Minister, His Excellency Chief Joseph Dion Gute. But what is the situation after that?
Sent by the same head of state.
Yes, in the same way, instruction the chef de l'État, that is the problem we are having. Our problem is we're hearing instruction the chef. Where is the chef de l'État? The chef de l'État, why can't he play the role of a father? Look at France. We are not saying that we are taking France as a model, but we are looking at our neighboring countries and how you should advocate, how you should handle the situation.
And the same France, according to the Minister of External Relations, has recently given an injunction to Cameroon on how to handle the crisis. So, talking about France, do you think Cameroon does not more have a sovereignty, Mr. Monica?
Now,
as far as handling our security concern.
Now that's a very tactical question, and I guess we still have a sovereignty, but let me say we have a lot of international interference, and we have a lot of key stakeholders at the international scene that are out there for their interests, and they're using the government to achieve that. And it's quite embarrassing to see that a country that has had independence about 6 years ago is still feeling the sickly of...
But how embarrassing can that be when we recently received COVID-19 fund alleged the Cameroon debt, external debt, was reduced at a certain percentage when COVID-19 hit hard our economy. And then we did not see that we could be embarrassed. Now that it comes to security concern, our partners in development are suggesting to us whether we could handle our crisis and stop preaching fake peaceful gospel, and you are saying that we should be embarrassed.
Yeah, because those partners have been existing. Okay. Yeah, before all the crises that we had or that we are still facing, they have been there. So what have they been saying? We've called for international attention. The world is not blind to what's happening in Cameroon, but yet we've not seen sustainable actions being taken. So that means that if we want to solve a problem, we'll have to reduce international interference. That's for sure.
Mr. Gabriel, are these guys not simply securing their investment in Cameroon?
And the problem is always turning around the investments in Cameroon. All the political interference into a nation, especially when it comes from, in quotes, the white man country to the African countries, there is always an interest which may be difficult for those who are handicapped to see that clearly. I think that the way France interferes and the way America interferes and the way, I mean, you hardly see the UK interfering since the genesis of the Anglophone crisis, but the way they do interfere into the situation can give you a clue of the kind of interest they are trying to protect. So France has had a lot of interjections in the matters of Cameroon since 2010, when most of the contracts or memorandums of understanding between the two nations were annihilated. So, if they are interfering and threatening, it is left to understand what they are protecting for the masses. But I think that the government knows best what is happening.
After you, Mr. Gabriel, we take the next issue still on. The Guardian Post that talk about Celestin Tawamba, the president of GCAM, which is the Cameroon Employers Group, the largest for that matter, who is now seeking for another term of office. Do you think Celestin Tawamba deserves another term of office, Mr. Carl Monica?
Now, that's a problem that we have been observing. A problem of transition, a problem of, where we hold on to power, we hold on to authority, yet we don't produce results. For me, I believe that we should grow beyond the stage of positional leadership into an effectual leadership. And he has to give way for others. He has to give way for new incumbents that are going to take the mandate from where he left and make something better. Because how are we going to know the potentials that we have if others are not given a platform to express themselves?
After you, Mr. Gabriel, we understand that Celestin Tawamba has just served one mandate, and he took after the former president of GCAM, of FOTSO, and we can record that it's through his mandate that he has made so many proposals to the government on how to handle the Anglophone crisis, on changing the Cameroon Business Forum to Cameroon Business Council, that is going to more power to business tycoon and astute businessmen in order to put them at the forefront of proposing economical policies that will help Cameroon to grow in its gross domestic product. Don't you see that Mr. Celestin Tawamba deserves another term of office?
Of course, I see so. Mr. Celestin Tawamba has done some good, some things which we can put on the advantage side, and we equally have his flaws. But we usually resort to the flaws of a leader. Personally, I think that he should go for a second mandate, because sometimes you have the first mandate to understand the ground, to understand the terrain or the milieu which you're to govern. And that is why I sometimes say that experience or longevity, it's an asset or it's a catalyst for proper governing. So we hope that in his second mandate, what he has put as foundations, he may begin to raise the blocks so that he can grow. So instead of alternations, we believe in alternations to give everybody the opportunity. Instead of alternations, a second mandate is what he needs now to instead prove to us that he can do better and that he laid foundations which he needs to see that the building starts growing.
And we take to the next paper, the post title, No Backs into Bars Market Offices, according to the Senior Divisional Officer Emmanuel Ledoux Angamba. He simply thinks that backs could harbor bombs, and so it's important that during this festive period, citizens should not carry this back in public places. Mr. Carl Monica, how did you welcome this information from the SDO of FACO?
Seriously, in fact, I was astonished.
Okay.
Because we need to start finding pragmatic solutions to problems. Okay. We have to let the talks go away and bring up solutions that are feasible and solutions that can be applied, monitored, and have a concrete feedback. I've never seen that anywhere where people won't move with their bags, people won't move with their carriage. And talking of that, bombs can be put anywhere. Bombs can be put in dresses, bombs can be put, even in phones and everything. So I think that message no matter how good it sounds, it's not practical, and the SDO need to rethink over it and maybe propose better solutions to target the insecurity that the country is facing.
Mr. Gabriel, do you think the SDO of FACO, Mr. Ngamba Emmanuel Ledoux, was put on pressure given that his communique is poured some 2 weeks after the Minister of Territorial Administration, Mr. Paul Atanganzi, gave firm instruction to CEOs of region to make sure that end-of-year festivities should happen in a serene environment?
It could be. It is very possible that it was the amount of pressure, because you can see the relationship between the order that he has passed with that of the Minister of Territorial Administration with respect to the banning of machetes and